Serafina Vale learned the price of barrenness the night the elders stopped using her name. They called her the liability. The hall was full. Too full. Torches burned along the stone walls of the pack council chamber, their flames steady, impassive, as if even fire had learned not to react. Wolves filled the benches in tight rows, alphas, betas, elders, and their mates, shoulders squared, eyes hard. No one sat beside her. She stood alone in the center of the circle, hands folded at her waist, spine straight from long practice. Shame had taught her posture. Humiliation had taught her silence. 5 years. 5 years mated to Roven, the pack's golden sun. 5 years of whispered prayers, bitter tonics, moon cycle rituals, and hopeful mornings that always ended the same way. Empty. When Roven rejected her, he did it publicly. "She cannot give the pack heirs," he had said, voice steady, gaze already elsewhere. "I release her." The bond snapped, not violently, those were reserved for love gone wrong, but quietly, like a door closing in another room. Tonight was worse. "The debt has matured," Elder Mailer announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our territory lease expires at the end of the season. Without capital, we lose everything." Serafina already knew what was coming. Her chest tightened anyway. Eyes shifted. Calculations were made. And then Elder Mailer looked directly at her. "There is an alternative." The word hung heavy. "She is unmated," another elder said. "No heirs, no political value." A pause. "But she is still Omega-born," Mailer continued. "Her scent is clean, her obedience proven." Serafina's breath stayed even. She would not beg. She had learned that begging only sharpened cruelty. "To sell one of our own," a beta started. "She is not our own," Roven cut in from the benches. He did not look at her. "She failed the pack." The words struck like a verdict. "The Alpha Billionaire is hosting a private acquisition auction," Mailer said. "He prefers discrete assets, untethered ones." A ripple moved through the chamber at the name never spoken aloud. Alaric Thorne, the Alpha who did not attend councils, the billionaire who bought packs the way others bought land, the man no one challenged and no one truly knew. Serafina felt it then, the moment her fate was sealed. "She will go," Mailer concluded. "In exchange, the pack survives." Silence followed. Not one voice objected. Serafina bowed her head once. "I understand." Because what else was there to say, when even your absence was worth more than your life? That night she packed nothing but a coat and the last book her mother had given her, a thing of paper and ink, useless by every measure the pack respected. As the gates closed behind her, Serafina did not look back. She had learned long ago that nothing waited there for her. The carriage that took Serafina Vale away from her pack did not bear a crest. That alone told her everything. No public transfer, no witnesses, no record. A gray cloak of anonymity wrapped the journey, as if the world itself understood that what was happening to her could not withstand daylight. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, fingers pressed together hard enough to keep them from trembling. The driver never spoke. The horses moved with disciplined silence. Even the road seemed to soften under their hooves as the forest thickened and the air cooled. Hours passed, then the trees began to thin. A wall emerged, tall, pale stone reinforced with iron, running for miles like a boundary drawn by a man who did not trust nature to obey him. Beyond it, the land rose into sculpted hills and meticulously planned gardens, winter green and unnaturally alive. A gate opened without a word. As the carriage rolled through, Serafina felt it, an oppressive pressure in the air, not quite magic and not quite fear, but something that made her skin prickle. Power lived here. Not the kind of power that shouted and demanded attention, the kind that assumed obedience. The carriage stopped before a mansion that did not look like a mansion. It looked like a fortress wearing luxury like a mask. White stone columns. Black glass windows that swallowed reflection. A wide staircase leading to double doors carved with symbols she didn't recognize. ancient markings that made the back of her throat tighten, as if her body remembered something her mind could not name. A woman stepped down the stairs as if she had been waiting. Her hair was silver and pinned tight. Her eyes were amber, wolf eyes, not warm, not cruel, simply sharp, like a blade that had never known rust. "You are Seraphina Vale," she said. It was not a question. Seraphina lowered her gaze instinctively. "Yes." The woman's eyes traveled over her clothing, her hands, her face. She did not look at Seraphina the way men did. She looked at her the way one examined an object for flaws. "I am Elowen," the woman said, "head steward. You will address me as Madame Elowen." "Yes, Madame Elowen." Elowen turned. "Follow." Seraphina obeyed. Inside, the air was warmer, but the warmth did not comfort. Everything was polished, floors like dark mirrors, chandeliers that cast controlled light, walls hung with paintings of forests and wolves that looked too alive. The staff moved like shadows, quiet and precise. No laughter, no casual conversation, no human messiness. A place like this had rules carved into its bones. Elowen led Seraphina down a corridor lined with doors, then down another hall where the ceiling lowered and the walls became stone. They descended and descended. Seraphina's stomach tightened with each step. Underground chambers were rarely built for happiness. At last, Elowen pushed open a door. A room waited. Not a cell. Not exactly. It was furnished. Bed, chair, a small table, a wash basin. There were no bars on the windows, but the window was narrow and high, angled so that light came in without offering a view. A room designed to hold someone without letting them feel imprisoned. "Remove your coat," Elowen said. Seraphina's hands hesitated at the clasp. Elowen's gaze sharpened. "You misunderstand. This is not a request. You are here under acquisition. Your comfort is a privilege, not a right." Seraphina's fingers moved. The clasp came undone. The coat slid from her shoulders. Elowen inspected her again. "Good. You will bathe. You will eat. And you will sleep for as long as you are able. You are to be presented tomorrow." "Presented to whom?" Elowen's expression barely shifted. "To Alpha Thorn." The name landed like a stone. Seraphina had never seen him. Almost no one had. But stories existed. They said he owned half the private security companies on the continent, that his wealth was not merely money, but leverage, influence, access, that he had ended wars without lifting a weapon by simply deciding who no longer received supplies. They said he was cold. They said he was ruthless. They said he was cursed. No one ever said that last part loudly, but Seraphina had heard it in the edges of whispered conversations, people lowering their voices, eyes darting around as if even shadows might carry tales. "What does he want with me?" Seraphina asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. Elowen stared as if Seraphina had asked why fire burned. "You are a solution," she said. "That is all you need to know." Then she turned and left, closing the door behind her with a sound that felt final. Seraphina did not sleep. She lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the mansion's silence. It was the kind of silence that was not empty, but guarded, like a predator standing perfectly still in tall grass. At some point, her mind wandered into a familiar refuge. Stories. Her mother had loved them. Her mother had been the only one in the pack who believed Seraphina's worth did not begin and end with her womb. Worth is not measured by what the body fails to give. Her mother used to say it like a prayer, but prayers did not stop packs from selling daughters. By morning, Seraphina's eyes burned with exhaustion. Elowen returned with 2 women. They did not speak. They simply moved around Seraphina like practiced hands, stripping her dignity with professional efficiency. She was bathed in water that smelled of herbs and expensive oils. Her hair was washed twice, combed until her scalp ached. Her nails were cleaned, her skin scrubbed until it felt raw. She did not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. A dress was brought, not gray slave cloth. not simple. It was midnight blue, heavy and soft, fitted in a way that made Serafina suddenly aware of herself as a body rather than a person. A necklace followed, black diamonds shaped like stars, cold against her throat. "Alawan," Serafina said quietly as the clasp clicked into place. "Why are you dressing me like this?" Alawan's eyes flicked to the necklace, then back to Serafina. "Because he does not buy what is already broken," she said. "He buys what he can claim." Serafina's throat tightened. They led her through corridors she had not seen before, above ground now, into the brighter heart of the mansion. The air grew colder as they neared a set of towering doors. 2 guards stood there in black suits, their posture rigid. Wolves, both of them, their eyes disciplined and empty. Alawan stopped. "Listen carefully," she said, voice low. "Alpha Thorn is not like the men you have known." Serafina's pulse thudded hard. "You will not speak unless spoken to," Alawan continued. "You will not ask questions. You will not plead. You will not raise your voice. If he is displeased—" She paused, and for the first time, a hint of something flickered behind her composure. "You will not be harmed," Alawan finished, but the way she said it did not comfort. "You will simply be returned to where you came from, and they will not see you as a daughter who came back. They will see you as a debt that failed." Serafina swallowed. Alawan stepped closer. "One more thing," she murmured. "Do not mistake his silence for safety." Then she nodded at the guards. The doors opened. The room beyond was not a throne room, it was a study. A vast one, lined with shelves that climbed to the ceiling, filled with books bound in leather and cloth. A fireplace burned low. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the estate outside. Winter trees, a frozen lake, and mist curling over the water like breath. At the far end of the room, a man stood with his back to her. Tall, broad-shouldered, impossibly still. He wore a black suit that looked like it had been tailored to his bones, and his dark hair was swept back, revealing a clean line of neck and jaw. Even from behind, Serafina could feel him. The air changed around him, as if everything in the room adjusted itself to his presence. Alawan's voice was suddenly careful. "Your Majesty," she said. "Majesty?" Serafina's mind stumbled. Not CEO, not Alpha, Majesty. The man turned slowly, and Serafina understood why the world feared him. Alpha Thorn's face held no softness, not even the kind, handsome men used to pretend at. His features were carved, sharp and perfect, in a way that felt unnatural. His eyes, gods, his eyes were a pale gold that did not glow with warmth. They looked like winter sunlight, beautiful, distant, and indifferent to suffering. His gaze settled on Serafina as if she were a document he had already read. "You are the barren one," he said. Not cruelly, not kindly, just fact. Serafina's fingers curled slightly at her sides. "Yes." A pause stretched. Then he walked closer. Each step was measured, controlled, the kind of movement that suggested he could become violence at will, but preferred not to waste effort. He stopped an arm's length away and examined her the way Alawan had. Only this was worse because his attention felt heavier, like a weight pressing her into place. His scent reached her then. Expensive cedar, cold smoke, and something darker beneath it. Something wrong, not rotten, not sick, just off. As if his power had an edge that did not belong to this world. "You were rejected by your mate," he said. Serafina felt her cheeks heat, despite herself. "Yes." "You were returned to your pack." "Yes." "And then sold." Serafina's throat tightened around the word. "Yes." Alpha Thorn's gaze did not soften, but something in his eyes shifted. Not pity, not sympathy. Something colder. Calculation. He turned away and walked to his desk. Papers lay there already arranged, as if waiting for a signature that had been inevitable from the start. He tapped one page with a single finger. "A contract," he said. Serafina stared at it. "I don't understand." "You will," he replied, voice calm. "You will live here. You will be protected. You will not be touched without consent." Her breath caught on the last word. Consent? That did not belong in the same world as being sold. Alpha Thorn's eyes lifted to hers. "You will be my mate in public," he continued. "My wife in ink, a symbol, a stabilizing narrative for investors, councils, and those who think an alpha's power should be diluted by marriage alliances." Serafina's mouth went dry. "A political wife?" "Yes. What do you gain from choosing me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. The room went still. Elowin's breath hitched softly behind her. Alpha Thorn looked at Serafina with a slow, deliberate focus. "Because," he said, voice low, "you are the only kind of woman my enemies cannot use against me." Serafina's heart thudded. "Because you have no family who would die for you," he continued calmly. "No mate who will challenge me, no heirs who will become leverage." His gaze flicked briefly to her throat, the necklace, then back to her eyes. "And because," he finished, "the world already believes you are worthless. That makes you invisible." Serafina felt something inside her go very quiet. Invisible. Worthless. Defective. He spoke the words in different shapes. But they were the same truth everyone had always given her. Her voice came out thin. "So I'm safe? Because no one cares if I live?" Alpha Thorn did not deny it. He simply said, "You will care." The words hit her strangely, not warm, not kind, but certain, as if he was stating a law of nature. Serafina stared at the contract. "What are the terms?" she asked. Alpha Thorn sat, folded his hands once, and spoke like a man who had never needed permission. "You will attend public appearances at my side. You will be trained in protocol. You will live in the East Wing. You may write, read, walk the grounds. You may refuse my bed." Serafina's breath caught again. "Why would you allow that?" she whispered. His eyes sharpened, and for the first time something almost like irritation flickered. "Because this is not about lust," he said. "And because my problem is not solved by using you like a conquest." A silence, then, "1 year," he added. Serafina lifted her gaze. "1 year? 1 year," Alpha Thorn repeated. "After that, you may leave with wealth enough to survive anywhere. If you do not sign, you return today to the pack that sold you." Serafina's pulse pounded. He had cornered her without raising his voice, a deal she couldn't refuse. She looked down at the page, at the clean lines of ink, the polished language that disguised a cage as choice. Her hand hovered above the pen. Then she paused. "If I sign," she said quietly, "what will you demand from me when the doors are closed?" Alpha Thorn's gaze held hers. A long moment passed. Then he said, in a voice so calm it chilled her, "When the doors are closed, you will tell me the truth." Serafina frowned. "The truth about what?" Alpha Thorn stood, and as he moved closer, the air thickened again, heavy with that strange wrongness beneath his scent. "The truth," he murmured, "about what it feels like to be unwanted." Serafina's fingers tightened around the pen. Something in her chest shifted, not trust, not hope, but recognition. A hollow speaking to another hollow. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. With a hand that did not shake, Serafina Vale signed her name. Because the moment the ink dried, Alpha Thorn's eyes flickered, just once, toward the window where the sun was beginning to lower. And for the first time, Serafina saw it. Not fear, not uncertainty, but something like time running out. Serafina learned quickly that Alpha Thorn's mansion obeyed 2 sets of rules. The first governed the day. By morning, the estate moved with pristine precision. Advisors arrived in dark vehicles that whispered up the long drive. Assistants carried tablets and documents. Security teams rotated in seamless shifts. Wealth flowed through the halls in conversations about acquisitions, territories, and influence that stretched far beyond pack borders. Serafina was introduced carefully, not as a mate, not yet, She was presented as Madame Vale, a future consort whose presence signaled stability. Cameras caught her profile beside Alpha Thorne's shoulder, her posture composed, her gaze lowered just enough to suggest grace without submission. The world responded immediately. Markets steadied, councils postponed challenges, enemies recalculated. She was a symbol, exactly as promised, and during the day, Alpha Thorne treated her as one. He spoke to her only when necessary. He never touched her. He never raised his voice. His politeness was immaculate, distant, and impenetrable, but the second set of rules belonged to the night. Serafina sensed it the first evening the sun dipped below the tree line. The mansion changed. Lights dimmed without command. Staff withdrew with an efficiency that bordered on ritual. Elawan appeared at Serafina's door just after twilight, her expression tighter than usual. "You will dine privately tonight," she said, "not in the main hall." Serafina nodded, smoothing her hands over her dress. "Is Alpha Thorne unwell?" she asked carefully. Elawan hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. "He keeps unconventional hours," she replied. "You will be escorted." The dining room she was led to was smaller, circular, with a domed ceiling painted in deep midnight blues. A single table waited, set for two. Candles burned low, their flames steady, almost reverent. Serafina sat alone for several minutes, listening to the soft crackle of the wicks. Then she felt it. That pressure again. Not footsteps. Not sound. Presence. The air thickened, as if the room itself had drawn a breath. Alpha Thorne did not enter through the door. He emerged from the shadows near the far wall, where the light did not quite reach. Serafina's heart skipped, not from fear, but from the sheer wrongness of it. She had been watching that corner. She was certain it had been empty. He looked different, still tall, still composed, but the rigid control he wore during the day had loosened, as if night peeled something back. His eyes were darker now, the gold deeper, molten. He stopped several steps away. "You should eat," he said. Serafina nodded and lifted her fork. The food tasted rich, but distant, like something remembered rather than experienced. She risked a glance at him. Alpha Thorne was not eating. He watched her instead, his gaze sharp and unsettlingly intent. "Why did you ask me that question today?" he asked. Serafina's fingers paused mid-motion. "Which one?" "When you asked what I would demand when the doors were closed." She set the fork down carefully. "Because contracts rarely tell the whole truth." A flicker crossed his face. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. "You were honest," he said. "That matters." Serafina tilted her head slightly. "Does it?" "It does to me." Silence stretched between them, thick but not uncomfortable. She found herself speaking again before fear could stop her. "You said you wanted the truth from me," she said, "about being unwanted." Alpha Thorne's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Why?" His eyes held hers. "Because people lie about power," he said quietly. "They lie about what it costs." Serafina swallowed. "And you think I won't?" "I think," he replied, "that no one who has been discarded bothers to pretend anymore." Something loosened in her chest. She nodded once. "When my mate rejected me," she said softly, "he didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply told me I had failed at the one thing I was made for." Alpha Thorne's hands curled slowly on the table. "He said releasing me was mercy," she continued. "As if my presence had been a burden he was finally free of." She met Alpha Thorne's gaze again. "That is what it feels like," she finished. "To be unwanted, not anger, not hatred. Just absence." The candles flickered. For a moment, Alpha Thorne did not speak. Then he rose. Serafina's spine stiffened instinctively as he walked past her, close enough that his scent brushed her senses again, that cedar and smoke and that other thing beneath it, darker now. He stopped near the window. "You should leave," he said. Her breath caught. "Have I displeased you?" "No," he replied, voice low. You have done exactly what I asked." He turned his head slightly, not quite looking at her. "And that is why you should leave." Seraphina stood slowly. "Why?" "Because," Alpha Thorn said, and something in his tone cracked, "the night does not forgive intimacy." Before she could ask what he meant, the pressure in the room spiked. The candles guttered, flames bending as if pulled by an unseen force. Seraphina felt it then, magic, raw and uncontained, sliding along her skin like cold breath. Alpha Thorn's shoulders tensed. "Go," he said sharply now. Seraphina did not argue. She moved for the door, heart hammering, the air vibrating around her. Just before she reached it, she heard it. A sound. Low, rough, not quite human. She turned. Alpha Thorn had doubled over, one hand braced against the wall. His other hand clawed at his collar as if it were choking him. The shadows around him writhed, stretching unnaturally. "Alpha," she whispered. His head snapped up. His eyes were no longer gold. They burned amber, feral and wild. "Leave," he snarled. Seraphina should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but another instinct, quieter, deeper, held her in place. "What is happening to you?" she asked. A sound tore from his chest that might have been a laugh or a growl. "You should not see this," he said through clenched teeth. The air twisted. Bones cracked. Seraphina's breath hitched as Alpha Thorn's form began to change, not shifting fully but fracturing. His hands elongated, fingers sharpening into claws that scraped against the stone. His spine arched, his shadow pulling away from his body as if trying to become something else entirely. A beast, but not whole, not free. He was caught between forms, as if the night could not decide what to make of him. Seraphina's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "You're cursed," she breathed. The word fell into the room like a key turning in a lock. Alpha Thorn froze. Slowly, painfully, he straightened. "How?" he demanded hoarsely. "Do you know that?" Seraphina swallowed, her fear giving way to something steadier. "I've heard stories," she said, "about wolves who bargain with power, about kings who split themselves in two to survive what they've built." His breathing was ragged. "Stories are lies," he snapped. "Some are," she agreed. "Others are warnings." She took a careful step closer. "Does it hurt?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "Yes," he admitted, voice barely human. "Every night." Seraphina hesitated, then did something reckless. She spoke, not to soothe him, not to placate him, but to hold the moment steady. "My mother used to say," she began quietly, "that curses don't exist to punish. They exist to teach. But the lesson is never what we expect." Alpha Thorn's claws flexed. "Stop," he growled. She continued anyway. "She said the cruelest magic is the kind that convinces you that isolation is safety." The shadows stilled. The pressure eased, just slightly. Alpha Thorn's form shuddered. Seraphina realized then, this was not a monster who needed conquering. This was a man who needed anchoring. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She told a story, not of princes or queens, but of a wolf who built walls so high no one could see him bleed, of a woman who learned to speak into silence and discovered that sometimes silence listened back. Minutes passed, then more. The candles steadied. Alpha Thorn collapsed into a chair, his form returning to human, though sweat slicked his skin and his hands trembled. Seraphina stopped speaking. The room exhaled. He looked at her then, not as a symbol, not as a contract, but as something dangerous. Something real. "You should fear me," he said quietly. Seraphina met his gaze, heart pounding. "I think," she replied, "that you fear yourself enough for both of us." Something shifted between them. Not desire, not trust, recognition. Alpha Thorn closed his eyes. "Tomorrow night," he said, "you will come again." Seraphina nodded, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because Seraphina did not yet know this truth. Every night she stayed, the curse loosened its grip. and every morning Alpha Thorn lost a little more of the power he had built his empire upon. By the third night, the mansion had learned Seraphina's footsteps. Doors opened for her without hesitation. Guards inclined their heads. The staff no longer watched her with the quiet calculation reserved for temporary assets. She was becoming expected. That realization unsettled her more than hostility ever had. Each evening followed the same pattern: dinner in the small circular room, candles low, Alpha Thorn present, but never seated too close. The air always changed when he arrived, heavy with that same restrained violence, but now it no longer threatened to crush her. It waited. And every night, just before the shadows began to stir, Seraphina spoke. Sometimes she told stories she remembered, half-forgotten folk tales her mother had loved, stories of wolves who guarded lost villages, of women who made bargains with the moon and paid in years instead of blood. Other nights, she made them up. Alpha Thorn listened with an intensity that startled her. He asked questions she had never been asked before. "Why does she forgive him?" he interrupted one night, brow furrowed. "Because she understands why he became cruel," Seraphina replied. "That is not forgiveness," he countered. "That is endurance." She had smiled at that, surprised. "Is there a difference?" "Yes," he said. "Endurance costs more." Little by little, their conversations drifted away from fiction, into philosophy, into power, into loneliness. He never spoke of his curse directly again, but she felt it every night, the way his shoulders tensed as dusk deepened, the way his voice grew tighter as midnight approached. Sometimes, when the pressure built too fast, he would ask her to leave early. Other times, he would sit perfectly still, hands clenched, eyes fixed on the fire as if daring the beast beneath his skin to emerge. Seraphina learned to recognize the signs. She learned when to stop speaking and when to keep going. One night, as winter pressed closer and frost traced the edges of the windows, Alpha Thorn asked her a question she had not expected. "Do you believe," he said slowly, "that a person can be more than what they were built to be?" Seraphina did not answer immediately. She thought of her pack, of the way they had defined her body as destiny, of the contract she had signed without illusion. "I believe," she said finally, "that people become what they are rewarded for being." Alpha Thorn's gaze sharpened. "And if the reward is power? Then power becomes the measure of worth," she replied, "even when it costs everything else." Something unreadable crossed his face. That night, the transformation came harder than usual. The shadows surged and the air warped around him. Seraphina felt the pull of it like a tide, dangerous, irresistible. She stood when he did, her hands clenched at her sides. "Seraphina," he warned, voice strained, "do not come closer." She stopped where she was. "I won't touch you," she said quietly, "but I won't leave either." His eyes flared amber. "You don't understand what you're risking." "I understand what you are risking," she said. "Every night you fight this alone." The beast clawed at the surface, then fury, pain, pride twisting together into something sharp enough to wound the room itself. Alpha Thorn let out a sound that was not human, and Seraphina did something that changed everything. She knelt, not in submission, in choice. She lowered herself to the floor between them, eyes level with his chest, not daring to meet his gaze. "When I was sold," she said softly, "I thought being chosen would finally mean being wanted." The beast stilled. "But you didn't choose me because you wanted me," she continued. "You chose me because I was safe." His breathing hitched. "And yet," she whispered, "here I am, still." The pressure in the room ebbed, as if something ancient had paused to listen. Alpha Thorn staggered back a step, his transformation faltering. Seraphina looked up then, her voice steady despite the fear humming beneath her skin. "I am not afraid of your curse," she said. "I am afraid of the part of you that believes you deserve it." Silence fell. The shadows withdrew. Alpha Thorn collapsed into the chair behind him, breath ragged, his hands shaking openly now. Seraphina rose slowly, carefully. When she reached him, she stopped just short of touching distance. He did not look at her. "You must not love me," he said hoarsely. The words stunned her. "What?" "You must not," he repeated. "This arrangement survives only if you remain untouched." Her chest tightened. "Untouched how?" "Emotionally," he said. "You cannot afford to care." Serafina stared at him. "Is that an order?" His jaw clenched. "No." "Then why are you asking it of me?" "Because if you love me," he did not say, "you will break the only thing keeping me powerful enough to survive." Because if you love me, he did not say, "I will have to choose." Instead, he said, "Because wanting you would make me weak." Serafina's voice softened. "Or human." That night, as she left the room, he asked the question for the first time. "Will you stay?" he said, not looking at her. "Beyond the contract." Her heart stumbled. She turned back slowly. "What happens if I say yes?" Alpha Thorn's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then I lose everything." Serafina held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said carefully, "Ask me again when you're ready to lose it." From that night on, the question followed her, not always spoken. Sometimes it was in the way his eyes lingered too long. Sometimes it was in the pause before he dismissed her. Sometimes it was in the way the curse struck earlier, harder, as if time itself were accelerating. And Serafina began to notice something else. The calls that came during the day were sharper now, the councils more restless, investors nervous, power was slipping, because every night she stayed, Alpha Thorn chose restraint, and restraint was something his empire had never been built to survive, because the deadline was approaching, and soon Alpha Thorn would have to decide whether to preserve the man the world feared or risk becoming the one woman chose. The first sign came in the morning. Serafina noticed it because she had learned to notice small things, the way women like her survived worlds that did not announce their cruelty outright. The mansion was too quiet. Not the disciplined quiet she had grown used to, but a fractured one. Footsteps echoed where they should not. Doors opened twice before closing. Voices carried farther than intended. Uncertainty had seeped into the walls. She stood at the tall window of the east wing, watching frost melt off the hedges below as the sun climbed. Somewhere beyond the estate the world was shifting, and it was no longer waiting for Alpha Thorn's permission. A knock sounded at her door. Not Elowen. That alone made her turn. A young assistant stood there, face pale, eyes darting down the corridor before meeting Serafina's gaze. "Madame Vale," he said quietly, "the council has arrived early." Serafina's pulse quickened. "That's not scheduled." He swallowed. "They insisted." She nodded once. "Thank you." When the door closed, Serafina did not move right away. She had felt it for days now, the tightening in Alpha Thorn's presence, the way his control frayed faster each night, the way the curse no longer waited for dusk to announce itself. And she had felt something else, too. Distance. Not from him, but from the role she played. She was no longer just a symbol, and the world was beginning to notice. The council chamber inside the mansion was nothing like the one from her pack. This one was circular and elevated, with glass walls that looked out over the estate. Power on display, not hidden behind torches and stone. Alpha Thorn stood at the center when she entered. He wore his public face perfectly, back straight, expression unreadable, suit immaculate. The man the world feared was intact. Only Serafina saw the strain beneath it. The council members spoke in clipped tones, voices layered with thinly veiled challenge. "You've delayed the merger again," one of them said. "Your refusal to secure a political heir is destabilizing markets," said another. "Your influence relies on continuity," a third added, "not sentiment." Serafina stood at Alpha Thorn's side, silent as expected. But she listened, and what she heard chilled her. They were not worried about his wealth. They were worried about his weakness. "You are losing control," the eldest counselor said flatly. "Your power signatures are fluctuating." Alpha Thorn's jaw tightened. Speculation, he replied calmly. No, the counselor said. Measurement. Seraphina's heart stuttered. Power signatures, curse. The pieces slid together with sickening clarity. You bound yourself to a woman without lineage, another counselor continued, without heirs, without leverage. That alone is a risk. And yet, the elder said, eyes flicking to Seraphina, she remains. The pause that followed was deliberate. She is more than an asset now, the elder said quietly. She is a variable. Seraphina felt the weight of the room shift. Alpha Thorne's voice dropped a degree. Careful. End the arrangement, the counselor pressed. Publicly. Replace her with a proper alliance. Restore balance. Seraphina's breath caught. Alpha Thorne did not look at her. No, he said. A murmur rippled through the room. Then you leave us no choice, the elder replied. We will initiate the succession clause. The word succession struck like a blade. Alpha Thorne's control cracked, not visibly, but Seraphina felt it. The air trembled, sharp and electric. You will do no such thing, he said, voice low and dangerous. The elder leaned back. Unless, he said calmly, your mate removes herself. The room went still. Seraphina understood then. This was not about heirs. This was about control. And she was the lever. Alpha Thorne turned to her for the first time. His eyes searched her face, not for permission, not for reassurance, for understanding. The council watched closely. Seraphina felt the truth pressing against her chest, heavy and undeniable. She was the reason his power was slipping. She was not an anchor, she was the cost. She bowed her head once. If my presence threatens stability, she said quietly, then I will leave. Alpha Thorne stiffened. Seraphina, he warned. She did not look at him. I was brought here to serve a purpose, she continued. If that purpose has expired, enough, Alpha Thorne snapped. The sound reverberated through the chamber, silencing the council. You will not decide this, he said, voice edged with something raw. Not like this. But Seraphina already knew. She turned and walked out. She packed quickly. There was no drama in it, no tears, only the quiet, aching clarity of someone who had learned how to leave before being pushed. The book her mother had given her went into her bag first, then the coat. She did not take the necklace. Footsteps echoed behind her as she reached the outer corridor. Stop! Alpha Thorne's voice cracked the silence like thunder. She turned. He stood at the far end of the hall, no guards, no advisors, just a man stripped of titles, eyes burning. You cannot go, he said. I already am, she replied softly. He closed the distance between them in long strides. You don't understand, he said. If you leave, you regain control, she finished. The council calms, the curse tightens. You survive. He stared at her. You think I survive? He asked hoarsely. Yes, she said, because you always do. His hands clenched at his sides. And what about you? He demanded. Seraphina met his gaze. I have survived being unwanted my whole life, she said. This will not kill me. The truth between them trembled. You don't know what you are to me, he said. Seraphina's chest ached. Then tell me, she whispered. Silence, the longest silence yet. Alpha Thorne looked away, and in that moment she knew he could not, because to name it would be to lose everything he had built. Seraphina nodded once. Goodbye, Alaric. She said his name deliberately. Not Alpha, not Majesty. Alaric, the man beneath the empire. Something in his eyes shattered. She walked past him and did not look back. That night, the curse came early. It did not wait for dusk. The beast tore through Alpha Thorne's control with a violence it had never shown before. Walls cracked, glass shattered. The mansion groaned under the strain of power unleashed without restraint. He roared, not in fury, in loss, because the one woman who had held him steady was gone, and with her, the illusion that power alone could save him, because the next choice Alpha Thorne would make would cost him more than control. It would cost him his crown. The city woke to rumors. Markets opened late. Trading floors stalled. Councils convened emergency sessions behind closed doors. News outlets spoke in careful language about instability and temporary fluctuations, but those who understood power knew the truth. Alpha Thorn was unraveling. Inside the mansion, the damage was unmistakable. Stone pillars bore deep claw marks. Windows lay shattered across marble floors. The air hummed with residual magic, sharp enough to make even seasoned wolves uneasy. Alaric Thorn stood alone in the center of it. No suit, no advisors, no masks. Just a man with blood on his knuckles and loss in his chest. The curse did not retreat with dawn this time. It lingered, a low, constant pressure beneath his skin, like a second heartbeat, wild, furious, starving. Elowyn stood at the edge of the hall, her composure finally fractured. "The council is invoking the succession clause," she said quietly. "They believe you are compromised." Alaric did not respond. "They are prepared to remove you," she continued. "Publicly, permanently." Still nothing. "Elowyn," he said at last, voice hoarse. "How long has the curse existed?" Her breath caught. "Since the first night you chose dominance over bond," she replied. "Since you split yourself to rule without needing anyone." He closed his eyes. "And how long," he asked, "has it been loosening?" Elowyn swallowed. "Since Seraphina." The name hit like a blade. Alaric's jaw tightened. "Then prepare the council chamber," he said. Elowyn stared. "You cannot face them like this." "I can," he replied. "And I will." Seraphina Vale was 3 towns away when the summons found her. She had taken a room above a quiet inn, chosen for its anonymity rather than comfort. No guards, no escort, just a bed, a window, and the ache of leaving something unfinished behind her. She was staring at the book in her hands, open but unread, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Her heart stuttered. She did not need to open the door to know, but she did. Elowyn stood there, face drawn, eyes urgent. "He is calling the council," she said. "All of them." Seraphina's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "That's not my concern anymore." Elowyn's voice softened. "He is surrendering." The words landed heavily. "Surrendering what?" Seraphina asked. "Everything." Silence stretched between them. Elowyn met Seraphina's gaze, something like respect flickering there for the first time. "He is choosing you," she said simply, "over power, over secrecy, over the crown." Seraphina's breath caught. "That will destroy him," she whispered. Elowyn nodded. "Or save him." Seraphina closed her eyes. She saw the council chamber, the weight of watching eyes, the way power pressed down like judgment. She saw Alaric standing alone, pride stripped bare. She saw herself walking away again, and she understood something with terrifying clarity. Love was not the absence of fear. It was choosing anyway. "I'll come," she said. The council chamber was full. Every seat occupied, every gaze sharp. Alaric Thorn stood at the center, no longer elevated, deliberately equal. Murmurs rippled as Seraphina entered. She felt them: curiosity, calculation, disbelief. Alpha Thorn turned. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just them. He looked different, exposed, relieved. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "You asked," she replied. The eldest counselor rose. "You call this session under duress," he said. "State your intent." Alaric drew a slow breath. "I relinquish the succession clause," he said clearly. "Effective immediately." The chamber erupted. "You cannot. That would destabilize. You would render yourself powerless." "Yes," Alaric said. Silence snapped back into place. "I will not rule divided," he continued. "I will not bind myself to power that requires sacrifice without consent." The elder's eyes narrowed. "You admit weakness." "I admit humanity," Alaric replied. Gasps rippled. He turned then to Seraphina and spoke the truth he had withheld. "This woman was chosen because she was invisible," he said, "because loving her would cost me everything." Seraphina's chest tightened. "And I was afraid," he went on, voice steady now, "that I would choose power again." The curse surged. The chamber lights flickered. The air warped. Alaric did not flinch. "I choose her," he said, "without contract, without crown, without protection." The pressure broke. Not exploded. Broke. The beast howled inside him, not in rage, but release. Golden light flared, flooding the chamber, searing, blinding, and then stillness. Alaric staggered. Seraphina caught him. For the first time she touched him. The contact sent a shock through them both, warm, grounding, whole. The curse was gone. The elder sank back into his seat, pale. "You are nothing without the crown," he said faintly. Alaric smiled, small, real. "Then I am finally free." Because breaking the curse was only the beginning. Now the world had to decide what to do with an alpha who chose love, and a woman who was never worthless at all. The council chamber did not applaud. It did not erupt. It did not celebrate. It sat in stunned silence, heavy and uncertain, as though the world itself were waiting to see whether it was allowed to keep turning. Alaric Thorne stood without the crown, without the weight, without the shadow that had clung to him since boyhood. For the first time, the air around him was quiet. No pressure beneath his skin, no second pulse, no waiting monster pacing the edges of his thoughts. Just breath, just blood, just her. Seraphina still had her arms around him, steadying him as the last tremor passed. He felt her warmth, not overwhelming, not consuming, but anchoring. Real. He looked down at her, and for once there was nothing guarded in his gaze. "You stayed," he said softly. She did not let go. "You finally told the truth." Around them, the counselors shifted. Some averted their eyes, others stared openly, as though seeing him for the first time. The eldest rose again, slower now, age suddenly evident in his stooped shoulders. "The curse," he said. "It is gone?" Alaric nodded. "Permanently." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "And the throne?" the elder pressed. Alaric glanced at the raised dais, at the seat carved from ancient stone, symbol of dominance, lineage, unquestioned rule. Then he looked back at Seraphina. "At dawn," he said, "I will formally abdicate." The words struck like thunder. "You would dismantle centuries of order," another counselor snapped. "No," Alaric replied calmly. "I will correct it." Silence fell again, deeper this time. "The Pax will not accept a leader who stepped away," someone said. "They will see weakness." Alaric's mouth curved faintly. "Then they will have to learn a new definition of strength." By morning, the city had changed, not in banners or proclamations, but in whispers. The Alpha Billionaire had stood before the council and given up everything, not for conquest, not for legacy, for a woman the world had already discarded. Markets reopened cautiously. Wolves gathered in quiet clusters, talking in low tones. Humans walked the streets with a strange new boldness, shoulders a fraction less hunched. At the gates of the estate, Seraphina stood watching the sunrise bleed gold across the horizon. She expected to feel fear, uncertainty, regret. Instead, she felt space. Alaric joined her, no guards flanking him now. Just a man in a simple coat, hair still damp from washing away the night's sweat and blood. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "Neither do I." He studied her profile, the way light caught in her eyes. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She turned to him fully. "Being chosen?" she said. "No. Choosing me," he corrected, "without protection, without power." Seraphina considered that. "I was powerless long before I met you," she said quietly. "This is the first choice I've ever made freely." Something in his expression softened, something unarmored. He reached for her hand, slow enough to give her time to pull away. She didn't. The abdication was public. There were no jewels, no ceremony, just a declaration signed and witnessed under the open sky. Alaric Thorne stepped down as Alpha Supreme. In his place, a council of elected leaders, wolves and humans both, would govern together. The backlash was immediate. Some packs withdrew allegiance, others threatened revolt. But something unexpected happened too. Women came forward, rejected omegas, wolfless daughters, mated and discarded wives. They came not with pleas, but with stories, of choices made without consent, of worth measured only by wombs and bloodlines. Serafina listened. She listened the way she always had, fully, without judgment. And Alaric watched as people began to gather around her, not because she commanded them, but because she saw them. "You're changing things," he told her one evening as they sat on the balcony of the estate, now quieter, humbler. She shook her head. "I'm just telling the truth," he smiled. "That's how revolutions begin." Months passed. The world did not end. It adjusted. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. Alaric invested his fortune into infrastructure, into education, into sanctuaries for those cast aside by old laws. He no longer ruled by fear. He built, and Serafina wrote, not fairy tales, truths, stories of monsters who were not evil, of kings who were broken, of women who were never defective, only unseen. One night, as snow dusted the grounds beyond their window, Alaric found her at her desk, brow furrowed in thought. "You've been staring at that page for an hour," he said gently. She sighed. "I can't decide how it ends." He leaned against the doorframe. "What's the story?" "A woman," she said, "who was sold for being barren." "And?" "She discovers she was never empty," Serafina continued. "She was just full of something the world didn't know how to value." Alaric crossed the room and rested his hand on her shoulder. "How does it end?" he asked again. She looked up at him. "With peace." Years later, children played in the gardens of the former Alpha estate. Some were wolves, some were human, some had not yet chosen what they would be. No one hurried them. Serafina watched from the steps, a book resting closed in her lap. Alaric stood beside her, contentment etched into the lines of his face. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The power?" He considered. "I miss who I thought I had to be," he said, "but not who it made me." She leaned into him. The world was quieter now, not perfect, but honest. And somewhere, beyond the hills, other stories were beginning, of other cursed alphas, other discarded women, other truths waiting to be seen. Serafina smiled, already imagining them. "Before you go, if this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Which line stayed with you the longest? Was the curse broken by love or by choice? Your thoughts matter more than you know.